Oh, well, hello, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Cafe con Esteban, or con Don Esteban. So this week's blog is entitled Hear Me, Heathens and Wizards and Serpents of Sin. And for those of you who might be an aficionado of the Broadway musicals, you might recognize that lyric. It comes from The Man of La Mancha. Now, while I enjoyed the musical, especially with Anthony Quinn, I'm actually referencing the original source material from Don Quixote. There has been something that has been taking place within the last month that has gotten me terribly, terribly concerned. You know, we've seen all these news stories of what effectively are law-abiding citizens that have used force in order to defend themselves against a violent attack. And they've either been prosecuted or, in one instance in Texas, recently convicted of using this force to protect themselves. And it always seems to orient around these prosecutors that are really kind of displaying a political agenda. Now, this isn't just academic for me. We are actually in the process right now of defending an elderly woman who used deadly force to protect herself from being a victim of a violent carjacking. And the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office has chosen to prosecute her, not to arrest or charge the individual that tried to victimize her. Rather, they're going after her. We brought in another attorney to kind of help us with this case. And during one of the conferences that we were having in his office, he looked at me and he said, I just don't understand this. I'm looking at these facts and there's no reason for the district attorney's office to be charging her. And I said, it's because she's no longer a constituent of theirs. It appears at the very least that the DA's offices, well, not all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but certain district attorneys' offices have essentially made the decision that they represent the criminals. And there could be all sorts of reasons for this, a claim that they're engaged in some bizarre form of restorative justice or anything like that. But ultimately speaking, the state exists for one singular reason, and that is to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We already know that. Well, those individuals that would engage in the use of force to deprive you of your life or your liberty, well, that is what the state is supposed to protect you from. Sadly, they're not able to protect you all the time. This is one of the reasons why self-defense is so fundamental to us. We need to be able to preserve our right to exist. Now, someone who would be effectively a tyrant and try to use violence in order to take that away from us, once we've secured ourselves, then the state would come in and prosecute them and hopefully incarcerate them for a long enough period of time where they're no longer a threat to anyone else. So that's sort of the theory behind this, the way this would work. And yet, the script has been flipped. It's been completely turned on its head. Now the criminal is, in fact, the law-abiding citizen. Now, a number of years ago, I was asked by a district attorney how, as an academic, I would insert myself into these firearms-related cases where clearly someone who was a criminal, or at the very least had a fairly extensive criminal record, was being prosecuted. And, I was oftentimes brought in to essentially make an argument that there was some sort of unconstitutional conduct on the part of the state as it related to the firearm charge. So this DA asks me, how can you do this? And I looked at the DA and I said, look, I represent the Constitution of the United States. That is my client. This particular defendant is an unintended beneficiary of that. But my fundamental client is the Constitution, as should be yours. But you're not. You represent the state. They're your client, and the state is very different from the people. This did not go over well with that particular DA. But I think it's instructive on sort of what the system is supposed to be about. Well, like I said, we've seen this flipping of the script. So now to keep the alliteration going with Don Quixote, he fought against these windmills, right? And engaged in these noble battles to preserve virtue among the Spanish population. And perhaps those of us classical liberals, frankly, on both sides of the aisles on this one, that realize that the state is becoming essentially a criminal agent in and of itself, we might have to don our armor and go fighting after windmills. Anyways, do read the blog. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.